We continue now at the top of Daf Memvav Amud Aleph and Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 46a. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing a brisa. The brisa is discussing what does the pasuk mean when it says V'ibadatem es shemam min hamakom ahu, talking about the Avodah Zara. You should destroy the name of the Avodah Zara. And on the previous Amud, Rabbi Eliezer said that pasuk teaches us that one has to completely root out and destroy the Avodah Zara. And the brisa now continues. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to him, he said to Rabbi Eliezer, V'alo kvar nemar abeid ta'avdun. It already says you should surely destroy, and therefore that means to completely root out and destroy the Avodah Zara. Imkain, if so, ma talmud lamar v'ibadatem es shemam min hamokom ahu. So what does it mean when it says in the pasuk you destroy their names? So again, lechanos lo shem. What that means is that you have to give a nickname to the Avodah Zara. Yachol l'shevach. Now one might think you should give a praiseworthy nickname to the Avodah Zara. And the Gemara says, l'shevach sal kadaitzach. Would it really enter your mind that we should give a good name to the Avodah Zara? Ella, rather, what it means to say is yachol lo l'shevach v'lo l'gnai. I might think it shouldn't be praiseworthy, but not necessarily degrading either. Talmud lamar, the pasuk says, shaketz t'shaksenu v'sa'iv t'sa'avenu ki cheirem hu, and that means that again we should treat it like it is disgusting. So haketz, that how so? Hayukorno sub beis galia. If, for example, they referred to the Avodah Zara as Beis Galia, which would be a language of elevation. Koranosa Beis Karya, so instead we refer to it as Beis Karya, which is a language of digging and something that is low. And the Meseches Hashas adds over here, Besvar Macherem Nosaf Pnei Melech. If they called it the Avodah Zara Pnei Melech, like the face of a king, so then Pnei Kelev, we call it Pnei Kelev, the face of a dog. And finally, Ein Kol, if they refer to it as Ein Kol, it's the all-seeing eye, so then we refer to it as Ein Ko, it's the eye of a thorn. And the Gemara continues, Tani Tana Kami de Rav Sheshes, a Tana taught before Rav Sheshes, and again a Tana refers to an Amora who teaches brises and mishnayos in the study hall. He taught before Rav Sheshes the following brisa: Ha'akum ha'ovdim es ha'harem v'es ha'gvos. If you have ovdei kochavim, idol worshippers, and they serve the mountains and the hills, so hein mutarin, so the mountains and the hills themselves, they are permitted. However, v'ovdei and b'sayif, those who serve them are subject to the death penalty of sayif, that's beheading by the sword. And Rashi explains, V'ovdei and B'sayif, those who serve the mountains and the hills, they get the death penalty by the sword. The B'nai Noach nitztavu al avodas kochavim, because B'nai Noach, non-Jews are commanded. They're not supposed to serve Avodah Zara, B'Sanhedrin, that's in Sanhedrin. V'amrin and Hasan, we say over there, Kol miso ha'amur l'Bnei Noach, anytime there's a death penalty mentioned by B'nai Noach, Ein ela Sayif, it's referring to Sayif, again beheading by the sword. And so that's with regards to mountains and hills. Now, v'yes hazroim v'es ha'yirakos, let's say they're serving as Avodah Zara, they're serving the plants and the vegetables, so then hein asurin v'ovdei and b'sayif, so then the plants and the vegetables, they are forbidden, they become forbidden, they're treated like Avodah Zara, and again, those who worship them are going to get the death penalty by the sword. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Lei, so Rav Sheshes said back to the Tana, Di Amar Lachmani, who's the one that says this? Meaning, who does this follow? It's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, it follows Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Di Amar Elon Shanato Levasof Avado Aser, he says that if you have a tree that was planted and then it was worshipped, it becomes forbidden. And so we're going to understand this brisa, it's talking about plants and vegetables that were planted not with the intention of Avodah Zara, but later on they were worshipped, even those are going to be forbidden. But the Gemara continues, V'lukma be'ilan shanato mitchila lekach v'rabbanim. But why not just say that this brisa is talking about a tree that was originally planted for Avodah Zara, and then it could even follow the Rabbanan? The reason why these Zraim and the Irakos are forbidden is because they were planted for the purpose of Avodah Zara. And the Gemara says to that, Lo sal kadaytach, don't let that understanding enter your mind. That cannot be the understanding of the brisa. Dekatani dumya dahar, because the plants that are mentioned in the brisa should be similar to the mountain that's mentioned in the brisa. Mahar shalo nato mitchila lekach, just like the mountain, obviously, it wasn't originally established for Avodah Zara. Av hainami shelo nato mitchila lekach. So too, when we're talking about the plants and the vegetables, they were not planted originally for Avodah Zara, they were only later worshipped. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was stated the following, Machlokas Amoroim, Avnei Har Shenidaldalu, let's say at stones of a mountain, and they came off of the mountain, they became dislodged on their own, and then they were worshipped. What's the status of those stones? B'nei Rabbi Chia v'Rabbi Yochanan, that's a Machlokas Amoroim between the sons of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yochanan. Chad Amar Asuros, one says those stones are prohibited. V'chad Amar Mutaros, and the other one says they're Mutaros, they're permitted. And the Gemara says, My time of demand Amar Mutaros, what's the reason of the one that says that they're permitted? And the reason is Kahar, because they're treated just like the mountain itself. Mahar she'ein bo tfisas yedei adam u'mutar, just like the mountain, because there's no human involvement in the creation of the mountain, that's why it's permitted. Afhani, so too when it comes to these stones that become dislodged from the mountain, again they're dislodged on their own. She'ein bohen tfisas yedei adam, there is no human involvement, u'mutarin, therefore they are mutar. But the Gemara continues and asks, Malahar, but what's unique about a mountain, Shekain Mechuber, that's attached to the ground. And so therefore maybe the stones should not be treated the same as the mountain. And the Gemara says to that, Behema Tochiach, that the behemoths, animals in general, prove the other way, because behemoths, animals, are not attached to the ground, and they also do not become prohibited when they are worshipped as Avodah Zara. But the Gemara says, Ma'ala behema, Shekain Balas Chaim, but maybe an animal is different, because it's alive, and therefore since it's a live being, maybe that's why it does not become prohibited. But the Gemara says, Har Yochiach, but a mountain can prove the other way, because that's not alive. The Chazar Hadin, you go back and forth, we're going to learn from Tzad HaShavah, the common denominator between the mountain and the animal. Lo roizeh karoizeh, this one is not like this one. Velo roizeh karoizeh, this one is not like this one. Hatzad HaShavah shebehen, and the common denominator of the two of them, she'ein bohen tfisas yedei adam, there's no human involvement to mutter, and they are permitted. Afkol she'ein bohen tfisas yedei adam, so to any situation that there's no human involvement to mutter, that will be permitted, and that's going to apply to these boulders as well. But the Gemara says, but we can have a different common denominator, that when it comes to both the animal and the mountain, they haven't changed from the way they originally were. They haven't changed from their created state. And so therefore you can say that the rocks that are dislodged from the mountain are not the same as the animal and the mountain themselves. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella asyumi behema balas mumamehar, but still, you can derive it from an animal, let's say, that has a blemish, so there it has been changed from the way it was initially, and then again from the mountain as well, you'll make a tzad hashava there. There you can't say lo nishtanu mibriyasan, because the animal actually was nishtanu mibriyasan. V'inami, or you can say, we learn it out, mi behema tama, from an animal that is unblemished, so the animal wasn't changed from the way it was created. However, umei ilon yavish, but it could be from a tree that dried out, that was nishtanu mibriyasan. And so again, we'll learn from the combination of those two, and therefore, in that situation, you're going to have a tzad hashava. And what's the tzad hashava? Again, the tzad hashava is that there's no human involvement, and therefore, when it comes to the rocks that are dislodged from the mountain as well, they will be permitted because there's no human involvement. And the Gemara continues, Uman da'asar, and the one who says that these rocks are prohibited, Lahachi ksiv shaketz teshaksenu v'sa'iv tesa'avenu, that's the reason why it says in the pasuk that you have to detest Avodah Zara. The whole point is, Di'afa gav da'asya midin l'hateir, even though you can make some kind of derivation that it should be mutter, lotasya, you shouldn't learn that out, and rather we say, again, that the rocks, even though there is a way to learn out, there's a logical way to learn out that they might be mutter, but we say that you have to detest Avodah Zara, we shouldn't learn that out, and therefore we say that these rocks are prohibited. And the Gemara continues, Testayim divnei Rabbi Chia desharu, let us conclude that it's the sons of Rabbi Chia that they say these rocks that became dislodged from the mountain, that they are permitted. Rashi notes, Bnei Rabbi Chia, Yehuda v'Chizkiya Shaman. The sons of Rabbi Chia are Yehuda and Chizkiya. We're about to quote Chizkiya, and so that's one of the sons of Rabbi Chia. What does Chizkiya say? Deboy Chizkiya, because Chizkiya asked the following question. Zokaf beitzel ishtachavos lo. Let's say somebody erects, he stands up an egg in order to bow to it. So what's the halacha? Does that become prohibited, or is it still permitted? And the Gemara explains, Kasal Kadaitach, right now we think, Lehishtachavos lo v'hishtachavelo, that the case over here, which Chizkiya is asking a question on, is that he actually stood up the egg in order to bow to it, and then actually bowed to it. That's the case. The kami boy lay, and the question is, Haiziki fasa ihavi maisa, ilo havi maisa, when the person stands it up, is that considered to be an action? Meaning, is that human involvement, or is that not considered to be human involvement? Avalo zakaf, but if he would not have stood it up, lo mitzvah, it would not be prohibited, because there's no human involvement. Meaning, it sounds like from the question that Chizkiya, who's one of the sons of Reb Chia, holds that you need to have human involvement, and otherwise it's permitted, and therefore the rocks that become dislodged from the mountain would seemingly be permitted. And so therefore the Gemara says, Shma mina, so we see from this, B'nei Rabbi Chia desharu, that it's the sons of Rabbi Chia who permit the rocks that are dislodged from the mountain. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, you're misunderstanding what the question was. Liolam eimolach B'nei Rabbi Chia da'asri, it could very well be that the sons of Rabbi Chia, they say it's prohibited, you don't need to have human involvement. The rocks that are dislodged from the mountain actually are usur. V'hishtachavelo afal gav de lo zokfa asura, and if the person would bow, let's say, to the egg, even though he doesn't stand it up, it would be prohibited, because you don't need to have human involvement. And so what was the question that Chizkiya was asking? And here what are we talking about? The case is he stood up the egg in order to bow to it. He didn't actually bow to it. In other words, he designated it as Avodah Zara. That was the question. Does the designation enough make it prohibited? And the Gemara says, well, Ulaman, who are you asking that question according to Ilaman do Amar Avodas Kochavim Shal Yisrael Asura Miyad. If you're following the one who says that an Avoda Zara of a Jew, meaning the Jew designated something as Avoda Zara, that's forbidden immediately, so then it's an obvious answer, Asura, that in this case it would be prohibited because there was a designation as Avoda Zara. And Ilaman do Amar Ad Shatei, and if you're going according to the one who says that you have to actually worship in order for the object to become Asur, you have to worship it, Halo Polcha, so he hasn't worshipped it. And so therefore that doesn't seem to be much of a question at all. And so the Gemara says, Lo no tzricha, it's necessary. The question was as follows. Again, he stood up the egg in order to bow to it. V'lo ishtachavelo, he didn't bow to it. Uva ovet kochavim ishtachavelo, but then the ovet kochavim came along and he bowed to it. And the question over here is that really we have a principle that you can't make something prohibited that's not yours. So the non-Jew bowing down to it really shouldn't prohibit it if it belongs to the Jew, unless when the Jew stood it up, the Jew is essentially demonstrating that he also wants it to be an Avodah Zara. That's really the question. And Kihad Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, it's like what Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said. Yisrael shezakaf leveinu l'shtachavoslo. Let's say a Jew stands up a brick in order to bow to it. Uva ovid kochavim ishtachavel, and a non-Jew comes along, an idol worshiper comes along and bows down to it. Asur, it is prohibited. Over there, it's very obvious that if he's standing it up, he's doing it for that purpose and he wants it to be worshipped. V'kami boy lay, and so therefore the question of Chizkiah is as follows: Leveinahu de minkra zekifasa, by a brick where it's very clear from standing it up what the Jew's intention was. There we understand it's prohibited. Avol beitza lo, but maybe by an egg we would not say that. It's not so obvious. O dilmor, maybe lo shna, there is no difference. Teku, and the Gemara leaves that as a question. And Rashi explains, Asura, again, by the case of the brick, it is forbidden. Afilu l'man damar ad sheteyaved. The point over here is even according to the one, the designation alone, that when the Jew designates it as Avodah Zara alone, that doesn't make it prohibited because it has to actually be worshipped. But here it will be prohibited. V'lo amrinon halav de ovid kochavim. We don't say that, well, this doesn't really belong to the ovid kochavim. Vein yachol les or b'hishtachava. Therefore, he can't prohibit it by bowing down to it. Davar she'eno shalo, if it's something that doesn't belong to him. To kevan de ukma Yisrael, since the Jew set it up, he's showing that he's pleased that this should be treated like an Avodah Zara. And therefore, when the Ovid Kochavim actually bows to it, so he's doing his shlichus, he's essentially an agent of the Jew. And Rashi continues, here also it's the same question when it comes to the egg. He's asking, is this considered a Giloy Das, that the Jew is showing that he wants it to be worshipped? It's not because of any action the Jew is doing. The question is what the Jew wants. Because again, if it's something that's detached from the ground, it's not a live animal. You don't need to have any actual action with the item itself. Just bowing to it can make it prohibited. Livnei Rabbi Chia, according to the sons of Rabbi Chia. So Chizkiah is asking, maybe it's only by a brick where it's clear when you're standing it up what you're doing, because the width is more than the thickness. So when you're standing it up, you're doing something unique. When you stand it up, it looks taller, and therefore, again, it's obvious what the intention is. He's revealing his intention. But maybe we would say by an egg that's not the case, and again, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Boy, Rami Bar Chama asks the following question: Hamishtacha velahar. Let's say somebody bows down to a mountain. Avonov ma'ul mizbeach. Can you use the stones from that mountain for the mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash? And Rashi over here really belongs to the next Amud, but it explains the question. Nevad, something that's worshipped. Debale chayim osur legavo. For example, if animals were worshipped, they would be osur to bring us karbonos in the Beis Hamikdash. V'afagav d'shari l'hedyot. Even though those animals are permitted to a regular person, it's problematic in the Beis Hamikdash. V'kami boy lay, and so the question over here is Michael Shem Nevad al hamechuber la'asr legavoa olo. Does this designation of Nevad, that it was worshipped, does it take effect on mechuber, on something attached to the ground, that it also would be prohibited in the Beis Hamikdash legavoa or not? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis.